Welcome to the online worship experience for Discover Life Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're so glad that you're joining with us and pray that you'll be blessed as we spend time in God's Word together. Our first announcement this week is about The Chosen. This summer on Friday nights at 7 p.m., we will be showing episodes from Season 1 of the TV series The Chosen, which depicts the life of Jesus in an incredibly rich and beautiful way. We will be showing these episodes in the Malaja Gym and invite you to come and bring your friends, family, neighbors, anyone you think who might enjoy the time with us. We will be providing water and popcorn as well as s'mores after the episode. We're so excited to spend this time with you and encourage you to bring anyone you think would be blessed, as well as a blanket or pillow or comfy chair so that you enjoy your time with us. Our next announcement is that on June 26th at 4 p.m., we will be celebrating the life of Leon Grabo, with a dinner to follow. Anyone who knew and was touched by Leon is encouraged to attend and share your memories with his friends and family. Now, as we turn to the next part of our worship today, I pray that you will be blessed and know that you are loved and cherished by God, who calls you his child.
Well, we are back in our series on spiritual mothers and fathers today. Tomorrow is Father's Day, and we're just now ending up our mothers section, and then next Sabbath we'll begin our fathers section. And this week, as we talk about spiritual mothers and fathers, I want to reflect on a very troubling trend in American culture right now. In 1999, well, I became a Christian in 1997. So in 1999, about 70% of Americans attended church. Now, the most recent statistic from this year, 2021, is that about 47% of Americans attend church. So, we have had a precipitous drop in those who are attending church, and it's not just as a result of the pandemic, right? The number was just barely over 50% before the pandemic, and now the pandemic is over, and we're just down at 47%. This is a very precipitous change from 1999 to today. And the fascinating thing about it is that it seems to me like as a society, we are souring on the Christian religion in general. And as I reflect on this, I think about the word religion in general, because in my experience, people are not souring on Jesus. They're souring on Christian religion. So in my experience, as I visit with people, I don't tend to hear people say that Jesus guy is an awful rascal human being. What I tend to hear people say is that they're souring not on Jesus, but they're souring on the Christian religion. And I want to pick up on that word religion. And I talked about this several months ago in outdoor worship, but I want to share it again. There is a Greek word that is eusebia, and this word was like the center of the Greco-Roman society. In Greco-Roman society, eusebia was the most important thing. Now, we are not used to using the word eusebia, but it means godly, pious, religious. So if you grew up in Rome, if you grew up in Ephesus, if you grew up in Corinth, if you grew up in Thessalonica, if you grew up in Colossae, you were raised in these little communities, and these communities were constantly encouraging you to be a godly, religious, pious person, and they had one Greek word for that, and that word was eusebia. And so mothers and fathers would say to their children, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Make sure that you are a eusebia, a godly person, a religious person, a pious person. Do you follow me here this morning? Now, in Greco-Roman culture, what did it mean to be a godly, pious, religious person? What did it mean? It meant that you would go to the annual festivals. It meant that when you were required to pray a public prayer, that you would pray the public prayer. It meant that when it was the time of the year to offer God a sacrifice, that you would offer God the sacrifice. In fact, the center point of what it meant to be a godly person in Greco-Roman culture was to offer sacrifice, right? Like God could be mad, God could be angry, the gods could be mad, the gods could be angry, and so we must offer that God, we must offer our gods a sacrifice. That's what it meant to be a pious, godly person in Greco-Roman society. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. Jesus comes, and when Jesus comes, it's like he dropped a bomb on religion. He blew religion up, and we see that in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, Peter says, that's God's divine power, has given us everything we need for what's that word? Godly. That's eusebia. That's godly. That's pious. That's religious. God's divine power has given us every single thing that we need for a godly life, a pious life, a religious life, and He gives it to us not by going and offering a public prayer. He gives it to us not by offering a public sacrifice. He gives it to us not by going to some religious festival. He gives it to us, everything that we need to be pious, everything we need to be godly, everything we need to be religious. He gives it all to us through our what? Knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Through our knowledge of Jesus Christ. This text and texts like it is literally, it's just an absolute atom bomb on religion. Jesus blew the religion of paganism to smithereens with teachings like this. Are you following me here? Because look, if God is mad and we have to keep Him happy by offering sacrifice, well, we're going to keep offering sacrifice. But if God is love, and when we have sinned, He gives Himself as a sacrifice for our sins, then that changes everything. And so the writers of the New Testament come along, and being a godly person, like today, right? There are Adventists, there are Baptists, there are Catholics, there are Methodists, there's Buddhists, there's Hindus. We have no universal agreement on what it means to be a godly person in our culture. You follow? In this world, if you didn't go to festival, if you didn't offer sacrifice, if you didn't do what it took to be a godly person, you were not eusebia, you were asebia, which was a crime, punishable by death. Right? Like in our culture, it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, like religion is like a sports team. Right? It's like you like the Raiders and you like the 49ers and I like the Adventists and you like the Baptists. That's how religion is treated in our culture. In the ancient world, you were either eusebia or asebia. Eusebia, you contribute to the flourishing of the community. Asebia, you're a threat to the community and we're going to kill you. Are you following me here? Jesus comes along, and Jesus blows that up. And Jesus says, you don't need to offer sacrifice. You don't need festivals. You don't need public prayers. Let me tell you how you become a godly, righteous person. You know how you become a godly, righteous person? You get to know me. Now, Jesus, in the process of doing this, blew religion up. In fact, the way I like to say it is that that basically the story of Jesus destroyed religion, but you got to get the second part. Religion was not content to be destroyed. And so you know what happened next? After Jesus and the gospel blew religion up, the devil circled the wagons with religion and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to blow religion up. We're going to blow Jesus up with religion. And so little by little, unbiblical things began to creep into Christianity. Untrue things began to creep into Christianity. Little by little, pagan practices began to creep into Christianity, and they totally shifted the perspective on what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so what we see happening throughout history is, and now we're at a moment where the asymmetry between, look at that. This is so terrible. Somebody's trying to call me on my iPad in the middle of a sermon, Sabbath morning. I should have answered it. Hey, say hi to my church family. I better turn the internet off on this thing. Little by little, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, began to blow paganism to smithereens, and then paganism redoubled its efforts and said, all right, now we are going to blow Christianity up. We're going to blow Jesus up. And you know how we're going to do it? We are going to infiltrate Christianity with untrue, unbiblical pictures of who God really is. And so little by little, this happened throughout the history of Christianity to where people literally thought that they were doing what Jesus wanted by persecuting and killing people who happened to think a little differently than them. This story that I've told you about religion, about Jesus conquering religion and then religion conquering Jesus, this story is told in the book of Revelation through the imagery of two women. Actually, it's a single woman, actually. This story is told through the imagery of a woman in the book of Revelation. So we'll put it up on the screen. And before we get to Revelation, maybe I'll give you a little bit of background. In the metaphorical world of the Bible, a woman is a metaphor for the people of God. For example, for your, plural, for y'all's maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel, your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. When God's people were true to him, they were considered his bride. And when they were untrue to him, I'll throw it up on the screen, Jeremiah 2:20, long ago you broke off your yoke and tore off your bonds. You said, I will not serve you. Indeed, on every high hill and under every spreading tree you lay down as a prostitute. So in the Bible, when God's people are true to him, they are presented as a faithful wife. And when they're untrue to him, they are presented as an unfaithful wife. And so what we're going to see is that the story I've told you, the story of how Christianity blows up paganism and then how paganism blows up Christianity, that story is told in the book of Revelation through the imagery of a woman, a pure woman, and an impure woman. Revelation 12, verse 1, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. This is a pure woman, and this woman is crowned with the sun and the moon and the stars. Now, I'm going to play a little Bible Jeopardy with you, and I'm going to see if you can remember the first place sun, moon, stars occurs. Sun, moon, stars. Sun, moon, stars. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, Genesis chapter 1. That's right, the creation story. God makes the heavens and the earth, and a part of that creation story is the sun and the moon and the stars. And what is the purpose of the creation of the sun and the moon and the stars? It is to provide light to the world. And so here in Revelation 12, we have this pure woman, the people of God, and they are clothed with the sun and the moon and the stars, i.e., God's people are to be the radiant outflowing of his glory and his goodness and his generosity. The people of God are to shine the light of his goodness and glory into the world. Now, this happy picture is... Well, it continues. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. And so this is a depiction of the people of God in the Old Testament, the 12 stars, the 12 tribes of Israel, leading up to the coming of the birth of the Messiah. And then the Messiah is born, and there is another sign that appears, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Now, before we go any further, I want you to remember the big ideas, okay? So big idea number 1, woman, and I want you to remember this, so don't forget this, okay? Woman, red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns. Okay, can we remember that? Clay's like, well, I got a lot of things to remember, but I got this during this time. Okay, he's writing it down, good. Okay, we'll review. Now, skipping to verse 13. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Okay, so now the Old Testament people of God have given birth to the Messiah, and now the dragon is in hot pursuit of the people of God. And I want you to notice what it says. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to a place prepared for her in the, what's that word? Wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a times and a half a time, out of the serpent's reach. From his mouth the serpent spewed, what's that word? Water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman, opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon spewed out of his mouth. Now there's 2 other things that I want you to remember. I want you to remember woman, red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns. All right? Then I want you to remember wilderness. And then I want you to remember water. Okay, you got that? That's 6 things. Okay, so here are the 6 things one more time. Woman. What's next? Red dragon. 7 heads. 10 horns. Wilderness. Water. Excellent. Okay. Now, here's the next question. Okay, you've got the people of God, and the people of God are being attacked by the dragon. And the earth helps the woman in the wilderness. Here's the question. Successful or unsuccessful? Were the dragon's attacks successful or unsuccessful? Trick question. I'll give you the answer. Well, I'll actually help you find the answer. Look at verse 17. And I have I think the NIV up here, but actually the King James, I should have put the King James up here. But probably, if you've been around Adventist churches at all, you'll have the King James at least partially remembered, okay? The dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring. What word does the King James use there? Remnant. Remnant is actually better. Now, let me ask you this question. You got the woman. She's being attacked by the dragon. She flees to the wilderness. She's protected in the wilderness. And then the next thing that you see is that there's only a remnant left who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. So here's my question for you. Successful or unsuccessful? Were the dragon's attacks largely successful or largely unsuccessful? Largely successful. And the reason we know that is that there is only a remnant left. Do you follow that argument? Yes or no? Okay, now check this out. By the way, you guys are going to forgive me. I'm going to go down a little rabbit's trail because I learned something this week that I'm super excited about. I love the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are absolutely God's gift to humanity. First commandment says that we ought to only worship God. Now, what we see in the next chapter, Revelation 13, Mark of the Beast chapter, is that the beast is leading people, the dragon is leading people to worship the beast. That's a violation of the first commandment. What's the second commandment? No idols. The beast encourages people to make an image of the earth beast encourages people to make an image of the first beast, okay? So that's a violation of the second commandment. Third commandment. What does the third commandment forbid? Taking the name of God in vain. Check this out. If you read that commandment, the third commandment, in Exodus chapter 20, listen to this now. It says nothing about speech. Did you ever think about that? Normally, when we think about not taking the name of the Lord in vain, we think that forbids cussing. Right? No cussing. The problem is that like the Apostle Paul cusses in the New Testament. At least he does in Philippians chapter 3. If you read it in the original, you get close to cussing in the King James. But if you read it in the Greek, he's cussing. Sorry, parents, I don't want to make your lives more difficult, but it is the truth. Taking the name of the Lord in vain is not a text about not cussing. What does it mean to take somebody's name? Well, I've only done this once. But when I got married, my wife, whose name used to be Becky Lovis, and we would call her Becky Clovis or Sunny Clovis or Lecky Bovis, and we had all kinds of funny names that rhymed with her last name Lovis. When we got married, guess what Becky did? She took my name. And guess what? She did not take it in vain. She does a great job of representing the best of what it means to be a Renner. In fact, she does a better job than any Renner ever has. Right? She took my name when we got married, and she did not take it in vain. She represents our family in an incredible way. The third commandment is not about not cussing. The third commandment is a command that forbids any of us from misrepresenting the goodness of God's character in any circumstance, which probably includes cussing, at least in most circumstances. Are you following what I'm saying here this morning? So Revelation 12 says essentially that you've got the people of God, and then you have the birth of the Messiah, and then there is an attack of Satan against the people of God, and that attack is largely successful, so much so that there is only a remnant, a rest of her offspring. There's only a small group who is left who still keep the commandments and hold fast to the truth about Jesus, the testimony of Jesus. And I got to tell you, I don't think it's a mistake. In Revelation 13, it talks about not worshiping somebody other than God. It talks about not worshiping idols or worshiping idols. It talks about misusing God's name. And it talks about the Sabbath when it says, worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water, Revelation 14:7. So those first four commandments are central to what it means to be an authentic follower of Jesus. And all those commandments many of those commandments went by the wayside through the attacks of Satan. Now, here's a cool thing, and it's hard to preach in Revelation with Nadine in the front row because she's like our resident Revelation scholar. I keep looking down there thinking, I hope I'm not saying something that's a little sideways here. But in the book of Revelation, you check this out. I actually double-checked it this morning. It's a really cool thing. If you look up the word woman, it does not occur in Revelation until chapter 12. And then it's just woman, 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 woman. You get one brief mention in chapter 14, which is a little side note, referencing back, or actually referencing forward. And then Revelation 17, woman, 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 woman. You follow? So here's the point. This story about this woman is picked back up in Revelation 17. And what Revelation 12 does, it's people of God, Messiah, Satan attacks the people of God and wins, except for the remnant. What happened to the non-remnant? What happened to the non-remnant? And the answer is found in Revelation 17, and that is that the non-remnant, the non-remainder, became a prostitute, an unfaithful mother. We'll put that up on the screen now. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters." Okay, before we go any further, I want to ask you to remember what I asked you to remember earlier. Okay, what are those keywords? They are woman, red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, wilderness, water. Okay. Now, as we read Revelation 17, let's see if any of those things come up. This is a prostitute, that's a woman, sitting on many waters. We've got 2 of the 6. With her, the kings of the earth committed adultery. The inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then an angel carried me away in the spirit into where? Are you kidding me? The wilderness, the same location as Revelation 12. And there I saw a woman sitting on a what? A red beast covered with blasphemous names, and it had what? 7 heads, 10 horns. I think that's all of them, isn't it? You got a woman, a red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, water, and wilderness. That's all of them. But instead of being a pure woman, we now have an unfaithful spouse, an unfaithful people of God. Revelation is telling us the story of Christianity ahead of time, and it's a really tough situation. It's a tough pill to follow. And by the way, one of the biggest mistakes that we can make is reading the book of Revelation like this. Right? Because it's very easy for Seventh-day Adventists to read this and say, those people who don't keep the Sabbath are Babylon, and us who keep the commandments, we're the remnant, right? And it totally lets us off the hook from worrying about the potential of bad religion in our own lives and in the lives of our community. I'm not saying that we're Babylon or we're not remnant. What I'm saying is that we have to be careful to read it in an inclusive way so that we don't let ourselves off the hook too. Because I got news for you. Bad religion can show up anywhere. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was Mystery, Babylon the Great. Oh boy, this to me, I'm sorry for stopping before I even finish the text. Naming this woman as Babylon is such a punch in the gut when you realize this woman is the people of God. Because God's people in the Old Testament, who was their biggest number one enemy for most of the history of the Old Testament? Philistines early, in the middle of the Bible, the whole minor prophets, the major prophets, the major and minor prophets, they all center around Babylon. And essentially what Revelation is saying is that the very people of God become like their own worst enemies. That's really the meaning of Babylon. That the very people of God have become like their own worst enemies. Now, I began this talk by basically talking about the crisis of religion, right? There's a crisis of religion in America. When I became a Christian in 1997, 1998, about 70% of Americans went to church. It's dropped from 70 to 47%. That's precipitous, right? I mean, can you imagine any business that said, yeah, we used to sell 70% of all the cars made, now we sell 47% of all cars made. That would be an emergency, right? Our hospital used to see 70% of all the patients in the county. Now we see 47%. That's a crisis. Religion in North America is facing a crisis, but listen to the punchline. It's a crisis that we made for ourselves. We made this crisis for ourselves by becoming Babylon, by giving up our God-given role of genuinely reflecting the goodness and love of God. Now, let me show you how this happened specifically. By the way, look what he says at the very end of verse 6. When he looks at this, he says, when I saw her, I was greatly what? I was shocked. How did the people of God become Babylon? Shock of shocks. Now, I want you to see in chapter 18 precisely how this happened. And to me, this is a very, very important warning. It says in 18:3 that all the nations were drunk on the maddening wine of her adulteries. Now, I want you to notice The kings of the earth, that's political, committed adultery with her. The merchants of the earth, that's commerce. So essentially what you have is a mixture of religion, politics, and commerce. And that these three massive institutions in society are working together to enrich themselves. Revelation predicts that the church, which once overcame paganism, will be overcome by paganism. And in the process will join, like paganism always did, paganism always leagued up with commerce. It always leagued up with politics. And it always did that to enrich itself. And this is what Christianity has done for much of human history. And right now, at this moment, in American culture and in global culture, we are being confronted with the reality of an absolutely bankrupt and broken system of religion called Christianity. And God is looking for a group of people who will do it different, right? And I'm really happy Marie was baptized today. It was so precious. And I loved her story because what she's found in her very loving dentist and in her loving Bible study group that she fellowships with, she has found authentic community, authentic relationship with Jesus, an authentic welcome, and she's found a home in this community. That doesn't mean that we're a perfect community. It doesn't mean that we don't have our warts and our bruises and our scars and our brokenness, but God has brought you into our gospel, Jesus-centered community, and we're so grateful for that. And I believe that there are other Maries out there who are maybe look at Christianity and they say, yeah, Christianity isn't doing it for me. That was me. Christianity didn't do it for me. How can I become a Christian when your God runs a barbecue pit in the center of the earth, roasting souls in hell for eternity? That was a deal breaker for me. It's like, your God is worse than Hitler. Right? At least he let them die. He didn't keep them alive perpetually to torture. Check this out, Revelation 18, verse 1. Revelation 18, verse 1 predicts a worldwide movement, and this is what it predicts. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his what? Glory. An angel is a messenger. That's what an angel is. That's what the word means. There's a special message that God has at the end of time, and that message is to enlighten the world with God's glory. Now, check this out. What is glory? Here it is. Moses is speaking to God on the mountain, and Moses says to God, show me your what? Now look at what God's answer to this question is. The Lord said, I will cause all of my what? Goodness to pass in front of you. And I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. And I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. Do you catch this? Moses says, show me your glory. And God says, I will make all of my what? Goodness pass before you. Jesus destroyed religion, and it was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Religion fought back and destroyed Christianity. It is time for the earth to be lightened with the glory of God once again. It is time for the revelation of the beauty of the character of God to be released. It is time for people who think that God runs a barbecue pit in the center of the earth to learn the truth, that God loves sinners and he gives them the freedom of choice. And if they don't want to live with him, he's not going to force them to live with him. He's the source of life. Okay, you don't want to be around him. You want to be cut off from the source of life. He will honor that choice and give you what you want, which is death. They need to know the truth that God has given us, because it paints a radically different picture of the love of God. You think about the difference between Calvinism and Arminianism. Calvinism says, you know what? You're in. I'm taking you to heaven. And you're out. I'm sorry, you're going to go to hell. And it's going to last forever. Why are you going to heaven and why am I not? It's my divine choice because I'm the sovereign God. And it's my good pleasure to save you. And it's my good pleasure to burn you. Okay? That's literally what churches teach. Many churches in North America literally teach that. And then we're like, well, why do people think that God is monstrous? Because God is monstrous in that theology? That's pretty monstrous. All right. Here's the big idea. This is a series. We're in a series on spiritual mothers and fathers. Much of Christianity has a spiritual mother who is absolutely bankrupt. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Doesn't mean that God doesn't love them. But it does mean that the picture of God that is being proclaimed is not doing God justice. In fact, you know what the picture of God that's being proclaimed is? It's a violation of the third commandment. It is a misrepresentation of his character. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with the high calling to accurately and adequately represent the character of God, both in our life and in our proclamation. And that's my challenge to us today. Let's go out. Like this angel, this angel that lightens the earth with his glory. This is not saying that someday there's going to be an angel flying around and you know, it's going to be an amazing, like, glowing angel in the sky and all the world's going to be... No. This represents us and our mission to display the goodness, the glory, and the love of God in our lives and in our proclamation.